Although some of you I haven't met, I know there are people here from Winchester Thurston School. I know there are people that have been friends with Mark from Butler High School, from IUP, and from a number of other different places. And I particularly want to extend a warm welcome to the Fogel family, his sisters and his mother, who may speak towards the end. But thank you very much in particular for the Fogels. I'm the director of one of 12 federally funded research centers in the United States. Our principal job is to produce experts. So people that are now in 9th grade or younger, that we try to encourage to study the various languages of our region, or to go there and live with families, or to bring people over here, to increase the library holdings, to work on research projects, to organize events such as this one here. All of that is part of the job, the remit of the centers called REES for shorthand, R-E-E-E-S, Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies, lots of E's. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking Cold War, restoration of the Soviet Empire. Be my guest. Go ahead, you can think that all you want. Here's how I think about it. I think about the 19-year-old woman who's from Kyrgyzstan, or Astana, Almaty, Bishkek, Tashkent, who's never left her country before, who with our support and encouragement comes to Pittsburgh, to Postvar, across the lawn here, and is able for the first time in English, which she's studied for years, to deliver her research to a room of PhD students and undergraduates and faculty side by side with us, for example, on Kazakh cinema or whatever it is that she works on, and we as faculty engage with her and add discussion and suggestions that she could visit our Hillman Library, where we have a spectacular collection of Kazakh cinema, for example. We teach it in our graduate courses, sometimes in our undergraduate courses. Is this Cold War? This is not Cold War. This is something distinctly different from restoration of the Soviet Empire. It's that kind of thing that we do. We put in the pipeline the next generation of experts, the people that you will see on television in a couple of years. We make sure that their proficiency levels are high enough. We make sure that they have read the most recent books, that they have a chance to come to events like this. And that's what we wake up in the morning to do. Why am I telling you this? For this reason. There are two mutually supporting projects here in this room at this very moment. One of it is irrevocably advocacy. It reduces itself to 3 words: free Marc Fogel. Tochka. Distinct from that advocacy project, supporting of it, but distinct from it all the same, is a different project. Let's say Marc Fogel is released tomorrow, the next day. There'll never be more hostages, there'll never be more people detained. Where are you going to get the expertise that are going to work in the trenches and have the expertise to work effectively in the trenches for the next generation? People, when I was in high school, there were people detained. People that are in high school now will find people detained. So that's distinct from advocacy. That's education. It's what the Soviets used to say, develop the cadres, sustain the cadres. We work on the cadres. We make sure that people that are now in 9th grade are going to be adequate for the job that lies ahead of us. So these two tasks are not opposed to each other. They're barely even distinct. But this is in part an advocacy effort, and it's also an educational and sustainability effort. And it's very important that we work in tandem with each other, because in principle, a research center is not meant to act as advocates. We're not meant to be partisan. We're not meant to say this but not that. We're meant to educate people. At the same time, there are times in which those two projects interfile with each other and come up and support each other. And I think today is an example of how that works. So we're going to have ambassador remarks. I'm going to turn it over in a second to my friend Sasha Phillips. And then we're going to hear the ambassador's remarks. Then we're going to see a short documentary film. The filmmaker himself has flown in to talk about the film. And then we're going to have a panel of experts, very interesting people that otherwise you get no chance to hear because we don't normally pull them together. And what's unique and valuable about this experience is precisely the following. Very few universities in the United States have the kind of boiler room kind of sausage factory, whatever metaphor you prefer, to pull together something like this. Political science would have difficulty doing it. Slavic couldn't do it. Film and media studies, the art department, and yet to have a center federally funded by the US government, Greece, we have the funds and we have the creativity and we have the team to be able to do this kind of work, but not alone. This brings me to my last remark, which is that I'm very grateful to the support from the Ridgway Center for International Security Studies, the Center for International Legal Education, and Ford Institute on Human Security, all of whom are our partners in bringing this together. Without them, not just financial, but logistical people that are here in the room right at this moment that pitched in, rolled up their sleeves, and helped us get everything set up today. So it's because of that collective goodwill that this is possible. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sasha Phillips from Dentons, Cohen and Grisby, one of the major law firms here in Pittsburgh, and she's going to introduce the ambassador. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you very much, Sasha and Nancy, and I just wanted to say how honored I am to be here with Marc's family and friends. And before I say anything, I agree the most important thing we can say here today is free Marc Fogel. And to also say we know that that will hopefully soon be an accomplished statement. And that's not And let me just add that this gathering here today and all the people who've contributed to making this possible, from the artists to the organizers to people who've just come to learn and attend, are part of an effort that I know will succeed. And it's one of the things that, despite all our problems as a country and as a society, and I'm not here to talk about those, but the fact is, when Americans come together for, as we've already described, for an idea, for a cause, for a belief, their coming together, their unity is incredibly powerful. And in this case, I mourn for the 3 years that Marc has lost in terms of his freedom, and I feel terrible for the suffering, is the true word, that he's endured, but I also know that he will know for the rest of his life that all these people cared and came out and did everything they could to achieve his freedom, and when it happens, he's going to know that. And I think that that sense of community and that sense of common purpose is incredibly powerful. So I'm honored to be part of that. I'm here today to talk about a few things. One of them is Marc, obviously, the most important thing we're all here to talk about today. And I'll start with that because there are things I know about Marc that many of you know in terms of what kind of person he is. I have the perspective of someone who was the chair of the board of the Anglo-American School of Moscow and St. Petersburg for 3 years. And that, to some extent, my wife used to joke, the ambassador I worked for used to joke, that was kind of my day job. And being deputy chief of mission at the US Embassy was kind of moonlighting. But to be honest, it was a passion and a commitment, and the school that not just we built, but the school that had been built for basically almost 75 years was a real accomplishment. At the end of the school's existence, it had over 1,200 students, more than 100 in every grade, about half of them foreign, about half of them Russian. It had an amazing campus on the outskirts of Moscow. That is probably the nicest school campus I've ever been in, and I've been on a lot of campuses. But more importantly, it was a center for thought and ideas and international engagement in the middle of the Russian capital that not just had an enormous impact on the kids who went there, but made a real contribution to Russia, frankly. And the tragedy of losing that school, a school that was established by a decree of Joseph Stalin in 1949, and that continued to grow and expand and achieve excellence for its entire existence until the Russian government shut it down and stole it. And I should also add, stole the $9 million campus that I personally helped oversee the construction of in St. Petersburg. Stole is the verb that needs to be used. Until then, it had made such an enormous impact. And one of the reasons people say, well, the school was a victim of the decline in US-Russian relations and also British-Russian and Canadian-Russian relations, because it was an effort of the US, British, and Canadian governments and embassies for all those years. But I actually believe it was a victim of its success in the fact that thousands of Russian kids, starting in the 90s when the school expanded to include Russian kids, had the experience of spending time with teachers like Marc Fogel and learning how to think and learning about the world from a perspective that would help them for the rest of their lives. And I personally believe that was ultimately too great a threat to the system that has been established in today's Russia. That kind of great teaching and free thinking and international coming together, which, I mean, we had over 60 nationalities in the school by the end of the school's time, was too much of a threat. The beauty when it existed was in the teaching, and that's where the commitment that so many teachers over the years since 1949, and I single out Marc because he was, long before this horrible thing happened to him, he was known as best of the best. And I know, I'm not going to try to speak for Ambassador Ridgway, our former ambassador in Moscow, but he said Marc was probably the best teacher his sons ever had in their entire time in school. I know a lot of other people who've said that. Marc was one of many great teachers, but he was truly great. And the commitment that was there to both the foreign kids and to the Russian kids was really inspiring. And so when I joke that my time as head of the board for 3 years was my day job, it kind of was, because it was real and it was concrete and it was something that I felt could make a real difference. And my own 2 kids were students at AAS as well and had a fantastic experience, as were several people here today who were former students at AAS, several people here today who were parents of former students. So while we worked to get Marc freed, I just wanted to say a few words about the former Anglo-American School of Moscow, because I mourn it. And its closing and confiscation, along with the school in St. Petersburg, was a tragedy that unfortunately represents the depths to which today's Russia has gone, and the depths to which our relations with Russia have gone. I have to believe the school will be back, along with a much more positive vision of Russia, but I fear it won't be soon. In terms of what you are all doing, in terms of what we are all doing, I just wanted to say, from the perspective of Washington, from the perspective of my former colleagues in the U.S. government, and I should be very clear that I am now retired. I retired almost a year ago. I speak for myself, not for the U.S. government, but I am in very close contact with my former colleagues, the people who've been working on our relations with Russia, and certainly on the exchange. People call it a prisoner exchange. I would call it an exchange of hostages for prisoners, because that's what it was. It is largely because of the efforts of the people in this room that, first of all, I'm confident that Marc will be back here and be free soon. I really am. I'm not saying that in sort of a rah-rah sense. I believe it. But I also know that it's because so many people said, you will not forget Mr. Fogel, and we won't let you. And here we are. and I can testify to the power of that. The power that got the President of the United States to say Marc's name. You know, that was one of the most important things, is say his name. Don't forget him. And it happened. And I think we could believe it would have happened if nobody had really made an effort and done all the things that have been done. I'm not so sure, but it did happen because of all the efforts of people here. I also think, and I want to thank Nancy for her comments about the importance not just of getting Marc freed, which is job one and the most important thing, but recognizing that this is a new and yet old reality. I mean, the Bible talks about hostages. Hostage taking is as old as human civilization. That said, we are seeing right now a real upsurge in the arrest and detention of American citizens and citizens of other democratic countries overseas. Without going into details, I have a childhood friend who's currently under house arrest in China.
Would love to know what compelled you, what happened, what drove you to make this film, and who helped you along the way. You can actually,
Nice to meet you guys. My name is Max. Thank you so much for coming out. So great to see so many of you here. So I was actually a student at AES Moscow for 10 years. And everything Ambassador Rubin said about the school, I echo. It was a truly amazing place to grow up, amazing school to go to in my very formative years. And that's because it had some truly amazing teachers. I was taught by the very amazing Jane Fogel, who was my 7th grade science teacher, married to Marc Fogel, who taught my older sister Masha in high school. And so when I left Moscow in like 2014, I lived in America and I went to school at Chapman University to study documentary filmmaking. And I had known about what happened to Marc since it happened just because I went to AES. So my friends that stayed in Moscow after I left, they all had Marc. My sister told me about it. Everybody in the community knew about it. But nobody outside of that AES community knew about it. Nobody at my school, you know, at the school I studied journalism and filmmaking where we're supposed to know about world issues. Nobody knows about Marc Fogel because he's overshadowed by Brittany Griner, Evan Gershkovich, everything else that's going on in Russia. So I knew that I was in a position where I could make this film and really raise awareness about Marc, about his family, about the true stress and struggle and destruction this whole ordeal has been and how wrong it is. So I teamed up with 3 other students who are not here today, but they are sending their love. We're so great. Seth, Kaylee, and Franny. We got to work on this documentary, and it was truly an unforgettable experience. We learned so much. And just thank you so much to you guys for how vulnerable you were, how much you supported us this whole time. I'm excited to see Marc soon. Thank you guys.
He's an extraordinary brother. He's a great person to travel with. And he's a great person to get into an argument with. Allow him to treat his pain and still be present.
Hello, room 49 in Moscow. I really have to tell you, this is the second take on this.
You've been teaching for 9 years at the American School in Moscow. You've taught all over the world.
You as well. Ambassador Rubin, would you recognize me to sit here? Yeah.
My second task is to essentially move us ahead to the next part of this event series, our panel discussion, specifically to introduce our panelists. Last but not least, let me also share the background of our other panelist, Professor Michael Kenny. Professor Michael Kenny is the Wesley W. Posvar Chair in International Security Studies and Director of the Matthew B. Ridgway Center, one of the co-sponsors at the event. He is also Professor of International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. Professor Kenny received his PhD in political science from the University of Florida and has held postdoctoral fellowships at distinguished institutions such as Stanford University and the University of Southern California. Michael Kenny teaches and conducts research on high-risk activism and political violence, organization theory and social network analysis, as well as ethnography and qualitative research. Kenny's previous research, which includes fieldwork in Brazil, Britain, Colombia, Israel, Morocco, and Spain, has been supported by the National Science Foundation, the Office of Naval Research, the National Institute of Peace, and the United Kingdom's Home Office, among many other organizations. He is the author of The Islamic State in Britain, Radicalization and Resilience in an Activist Network, a book which received a 2019 award from the American Political Science Association. He also authored From Pablo to Osama, Trafficking and Terrorist Networks, Government Bureaucracies and Competitive Adaptation. Professor Kenny published multiple articles on terrorism, Islamist militancy, and transnational organized crime in journals, first-rate journals such as Political Psychology, the Journal of Conflict Resolution, Survival, Orbis, Global Crime, Studies in Conflict and Terrorism and Political Violence, and other important outlets. Professor Kenny, we are glad to have you with us. And
we're here for Marc, but as has already been said, it's not just Marc who is being held hostage by Russia. There are other Americans detained in Russia. Knessia Karolina, Michael Travis Leak. There are people from France being detained by Russia, as well as other countries. So the first thing I'd like to do is, as a security studies professor, is step back, look at the larger conflict context. We are engaged in a new Cold War with Russia and China. And Marc Fogel, unfortunately, is a pawn in that war. He is a tool that is being used by a very authoritarian Russian government, a government that has become more and more authoritarian over time. Like some people in this room, I'm old enough to remember Russia's liberal moment in the 90s. We're far removed from that today, tragically. And the United States finds itself, for better or worse, in a global geopolitical struggle between liberal democratic states like us on the one hand, and authoritarian states like Russia and China on the other hand. And so tragically, individuals like Marc Fogel, who have nothing to do with the larger political struggle, have been swept up in its vortex. And in some cases, like Marc's, the Russian government has these excuses, has these criminal charges that it likes to levy against them. But let us be clear, Marc Fogel's detainment is not about medical marijuana at all. He is a pawn in this larger struggle. He is a victim. In this country, medical cannabis is legal in about 38 states. Recreational cannabis is legal in about 24 states, including most recently Ohio. Actually, the next president of the United States is going to be faced with the question of whether he, or hopefully her, decide to make cannabis federally legal for medicinal purposes. That's actually going to be a policy decision. My point is, the behavior that the Russian government criminalized in Marc's case is as common in our country as going to Rite Aid to pick up your cold medicine. In fact, on Friday, I was downtown in the Pittsburgh suburb where I live, just 6 miles from here. And one of the courses that I teach here at Pitt is a drug policy course. So I was just in the neighborhood. I'm like, okay, it's very common. This case is not and was never about cannabis. It's about the larger geopolitical struggle between the United States and Russia and China and other authoritarian countries. And he tragically is a pawn. Obviously, we want to resolve Marc's situation. That's why we're here. And some of us might get a little dismayed or frustrated, or Dr. Kennedy, you're talking about this larger struggle, so what can we do? Well, in fact, as has been said several times, there's a lot that we can do. It's no coincidence that people like Brittany Griner and the Wall Street journalists, have been freed. They're high-profile figures, right? As Sasha was saying earlier, Marc is not. He doesn't have that cachet. History teachers usually don't. Neither do social science professors. As Nancy
I was
knows.
thinking humanities even less so.
Yeah, humanities even less so. You said it, not me, Nancy. So what do we do? Well, with the one tool that we have left to us, which is our voices, our advocacy, as David was saying. This is really Marc's best shot. So that's why this event is so important, is to raise our voices and to take steps that we can take, not as famous people, rich people, but just as everyday, normal American citizens doing the best we can to pay our taxes and to live as law-abiding citizens in this country. So I'll close by inviting each and every one of us, myself included, to use our voices to help free Marc, so that hopefully the next time we all get together, we are getting together to celebrate Marc and his release from this awful nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you.
To not letting injustices like this just be not addressed. And that probably the single most important thing we can do as Americans. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
I know there
Event like this at the University of Pittsburgh. We're desperate to get this story out and into broader United States. So thank you so much to the University of Pittsburgh and for Eric Urban for coming in to Pittsburgh to speak on Marc's behalf, and to Max Cartman as well. The film has triggered, I think has triggered his students that have from the early 90s to Malaysia, Medellin, from all over the world to step up, and so we're extremely grateful. Thank you very much for being here. Oh, and my sister Lisa, hi.
I want to say thanks to all the legislators in Pennsylvania who have all done a lot. Unfortunately, it hasn't been enough to get Mark home, but Senator Casey, Senator Fetterman, Representative Kelly, Deluzio, Reschenthaler, there's Esther Daines from Montana. A lot of people have helped a lot, and I wanted to thank them as well. And also I want to ask your help, because it's really nice to hear people say they think Mark's going to be here. I don't yet feel that. So I don't want anybody leaving thinking it's not important to write to your congressman, to write to the State Department, to go to anybody you know that you think can make a difference and say Mark's name and ask for help. And I appreciate that we should be patient, but my mother is 95 years old, so time is not on our side. So, to hell with patience, please do this.
I'm going to offer the last word to Sasha, if you'd like to say something before we thank everybody for coming and wish you a good afternoon. Sasha, would you like to give us the closing word?
That's really one of the more important things you could have done on this Saturday afternoon to help Mark, and we talked about others too, to help everybody who is a political pawn, who is a hostage in this very complex situation, as you have heard our panel describe. Come home. Receive the appropriate designation, regardless of how you call it. Receive the appropriate designation with which this designation is not just a word, right? Yeah, with it comes a host of various powers and resources. Imagine the entire weight of the US government behind you and your family. That's what that designation brings. So I'm grateful to every single one of you for coming here, for lending your voice, your experience, your talent, your ideas, and hopefully your action. You have heard Mark's family speak, you have heard Lisa. Write to your representatives, write to your congressman. This is not, and I'd like to underscore what we've heard from the panel, this is not a partisan effort. Marc Fogel is probably the person who brought the two sides of the political spectrum together in Pennsylvania. We have heard from both sides, from Republicans and Democrats, on Mark's behalf. Everybody agrees he needs to come home. This is not partisan at all. Mark needs to be home with his mother. He needs to have that chance, and you have a chance to lend your voice to bring him back. Write to your representatives. Please write to Secretary Blinken. Please write to Jake Sullivan. For any of you who would like any addresses, contact information, please see me afterwards. I'm happy to pass that along. Please look at the freemarkfogel.net website and the various social media groups. There's wonderful support there. There are wonderful volunteers that are helping everybody to do what they can and want to. Paint a painting, film a film, write a poem, speak up. Together, your voice will be heard. Together, it will be channeled into an action that will bring Marc Fogel home. Thank you very much.